June 2nd, 1997, Napa, California. 33 teenagers from Napa High School are crowding the narrow steps of the Bonsai Tower, water dripping off their swimsuits, foam mats tucked under their arms, laughter echoing off the fiberglass. It's their senior trip, one final ritual before graduation. Sunburned and exhilarated, they link arms as they climb, daring each other to break last year's record. The challenge: fit as many people as possible onto the top of the Banzai Pipeline slide at once. 18-year-old Quimbly Gigliotti is among them. At the top platform, she stands shoulder to shoulder with her classmates. No lifeguard in sight, no one stopping them. The sign at the base clearly reads, "One rider at a time," but nobody's looking down. They chant in unison, a reckless countdown fueled by adrenaline and bravado. The first wave rushes down a slippery chute, the mats sliding across the surface like stones on water. But before the last student has even taken up their position, something changes. There's a strange groan, wet, heavy, decidedly wrong. And with the next breath, the entire upper section begins to collapse. It doesn't just crack, it collapses. The fiberglass cuts down, the platform buckles, and suddenly the bodies standing shoulder to shoulder are no longer standing. They're flying. Some fall into the shallow pools, others crash into the concrete, and within seconds the excitement turns to screams. Foam mats fly in all directions as bodies fall to the ground, and screams echo off the concrete, sharp and panicked. One girl lies face down, completely still, a dark puddle spreading beneath her. Someone nearby tries to move, but can't. His spine is shattered. Another boy writhes, his pelvis shattered, barely conscious from the pain. Within minutes, paramedics are racing across the wet sidewalk, improvising as they go. Towels become bandages, foam mats become stretchers. 32 students are rushed to the nearest hospitals. All of them, except Quimbly. Her injuries are immediate and fatal. The Banzai Pipeline was never designed to carry so many children at once. Built for single passengers on soft mats, it was designed to carry a maximum of 300 pounds. But that day, more than 24 teenagers crowded into a platform barely 4 meters long, pushing more than 2 metric tons of cargo. It wasn't even a question of if it would break down, but only when. And the scariest thing was that this wasn't the first time. The year before, a similar stunt, 18 kids climbing a single slide, had gone off without a scratch, so no one wondered if it was worth trying again. But this time, it ended not with laughter, but with a death toll. The park reopened the following season as if nothing had happened. No criminal charges, no public reckoning. A $1.7 million settlement was eventually paid to Quimbly's family, while Napa High School, named in the lawsuit, faced accusations of allowing a dangerous tradition to flourish unchecked. But for the students who lived through it, no legal resolution could erase what they saw that day. The image of blood in the water, the shrieks that tore through the air, and the eerie stillness that followed. Those images remained burned into the memory, long after the fences were repaired and the laughter returned. It wasn't a matter of if, only when. All it took was 10 seconds for everything to collapse. 25 years earlier, on the other side of the Atlantic, a different kind of thrill ride, older, wooden, and shabby, had its own legacy of neglect. And there too, the joy of celebration was interrupted by the silence that followed. 2:05 p.m., May 30th, 1972, Battersea Park, Great Britain. The Big Dipper train began its slow climb up the incline, squeaking along a wooden track that's carried millions before. Below, the afternoon fair buzzed with life. Games clatter, children yell over looping music, the scent of fried dough hangs in the warm London air. But above it all, the wooden beams groan faintly as the weight shifts higher. In the third car, 15-year-old Alison Comerford leans into the wind beside her friend Liz. It's their third ride of the day, a final thrill before heading home. Around them, 29 other passengers settle in, most of them kids on half-term holiday, laughing and squinting into the sunlight as the train ascends. They're connected by a single haulage cable, pulling all 31 rides steadily toward the top. A sudden metallic snap cuts through the steady rhythm of the climb, a sound too sharp to be anything ordinary. The train jolts violently, hesitates for a breathless moment at the peak, and then, almost inevitably, starts to slide backward. Up top, the brakeman lunges for the emergency lever, but it refuses to move. The system, worn down by years of makeshift fixes and decaying parts, is already past the point of helping. While the fairgrounds hum with music and the calls of vendors, Inside the cars, the laughter fades. The shift is almost imperceptible. Just a flicker of unease as the train begins to slide backward. The wooden frame groans under the strain, deeper and louder than before. Then something snaps. A rear car lifts off the tracks and bursts through the wooden siding, tearing a hole in the structure. The rest of the train collapses behind it, metal grinding, beams splintering, cars crumbling into one another. In the third car, Allison's grip breaks as the train lurches. She's thrown forward, into the wreckage ahead. The impact is immediate and violent. Passengers are scattered like debris. Some land clear of the track in a tangle of splinters and steel. Others remain trapped inside the cars, pinned between twisted railing and ruptured supports. Then, just as suddenly, it stops. The train settles, and the wreckage goes still. Dust drifts lazily through the air, coating the collapsed cars in a gray haze. The broken frame groans beneath its own weight. But the only other sound is the faint, oblivious loop of carnival music still playing through the loudspeakers. For a long, surreal moment, nothing moves, until the silence is shattered by screams, raw and terrified, coming not from the ride, but from the crowd now rushing toward it. As the dust begins to clear, people break from the crowd and surge toward the wreckage. Some shout out names, voices shaking with panic. Others scramble onto the collapsed structure, scanning the twisted debris for any sign of movement. Fare staff try to hold them back, forming a fragile barrier that barely holds against the rising desperation. One man drops to his knees beside an unconscious girl, gently shaking her shoulders as he calls her name again and again. Nearby, another voice pleads for help, but no one answers. Paramedics arrive moments later, navigating the chaos with urgency as they begin pulling apart beams and twisted railings. What they find is worse than expected. Bodies mangled between the crushed frames, faces streaked with blood and dust. Some passengers are still breathing barely, while others lie motionless, beyond saving. In the wreckage, they find Liz, still alive, but trapped beneath the collapsed car. Her voice is too weak to call out, her body pinned in place. But her hand is clenched tightly around Allison, refusing to let go. Allison lies motionless, unresponsive, as rescuers reach her. By nightfall, the scale of the damage begins to surface. 13 passengers remain in critical condition, rushed into surgery for shattered hips, broken spines, and internal bleeding. The fairground, once filled with music and laughter, is empty. Police evacuate the park, sealing off the ride behind temporary fencing as flashing lights replace the carousel glow. By morning, reporters crowd the perimeter, and photos of twisted steel and splintered beams dominate the headlines. Names begin to circulate, some confirmed, others whispered by classmates and parents waiting for answers. But as investigators step in to examine the wreckage, what they find beneath the collapse proves far more disturbing than the crash itself. This wasn't an accident, in the way most people understood it. The Big Dipper had suddenly failed. It had been deteriorating for years, the warning signs piling up routinely ignored. As far back as 1951, an empty car had derailed during a test run. In 1968, another incident left a woman with a broken arm. Then, in 1970, a fire tore through part of the structure, damaging several key sections. Rather than rebuild properly, the operators patched it together using salvaged parts, some of them more than 50 years old. By the time inspectors examined the aftermath of the crash, the decay was impossible to overlook. They documented 51 separate faults throughout the ride: rotting wood, incomplete emergency exits, and a failed dog brake, a critical safety mechanism designed to prevent rollback. Staff training was inconsistent at best. Some employees were underage, and according to multiple witness reports, several had been drinking while on duty. 3 men were eventually brought to trial for manslaughter: the ride's manager, the supervising engineer, and a site official responsible for safety. But despite the extensive list of violations and the lives lost, all 3 were acquitted. Just 1 week after the crash, the fair assumed operations. The remnants of the Big Dipper were dismantled quietly, carted away in sections as if removing the wreckage could erase the memory. 5 children died that day, but their absence left no permanent mark on the place where it happened. No names of the victims were engraved into any public record. Within 2 years, the Battersea Park Fun Fair closed for good, not with a statement or a gesture of remembrance, but with the quiet folding of tents and the fading of music. it would take half a century for anyone to speak of it again. On May 30th, 2022, exactly 50 years after the crash, a single tree was planted in Battersea Park on the spot where the Big Dipper once stood. The families of the victims gathered there, some reuniting for the first time since that terrible day. Not for ceremony, not for speeches or cameras, but for something quieter and far more human. For those who came, that small act was the first and only time the tragedy had been acknowledged in public. The Big Dipper was torn down, but the pattern didn't end there. 8 years later, in another country, another ride would fail not because of age or rust, but because someone thought the rules didn't apply to them. August 13th, 1981, Hamburg, Germany. It's just before 1 a.m. at the Hamburg Dom, one of Europe's oldest and most beloved fairgrounds. At the far end of the park, 23 riders stepped into the Skylab, a massive rotating gondola that lifts passengers high into the air and spins them beneath flashing lights and a wash of noise. It's the last ride of the night, the kind of closing thrill meant to linger in memory. None of them realizes that just beyond the edge of the ride, danger is already waiting. Hours earlier, just meters from the Skylab's outer arc, a technician named Norbert Vita had begun unscheduled repairs on his own attraction, the Catapult roller coaster. Its transmission had failed, and rather than wait for the fair to close, Vita brought in a telescopic crane to begin immediate work. The crane wasn't insured, it had no clearance to operate near the public, and should never have been active while surrounding rides were still in motion. But assuming Skylab had completed its final run for the night, Vita extended the hydraulic arm across the ride zone without alerting anyone. But Vita's assumption would prove fatal. At 12:54 a.m., the Skylab began what was meant to be its final cycle of the night. Music thundering through the speakers, colored lights sweeping across the dark sky, and the gondola lifting smoothly into its full rotation. Unseen by the riders, the crane's arm remained extended directly in their path. Within moments, the first cabin made contact. The impact was catastrophic, steel tearing through the gondola's undercarriage, ripping metal like paper, and launching passengers into the air. Some were thrown sideways, others head first, plummeting from 15 meters above into a scatter of concrete, scaffolding, and structural supports below. One by one, the remaining cabins collided with the obstruction, compounding the destruction and reducing the ride to a collapsing web of twisted beams, shredded safety gear, and shattered bodies sprawled across the platform. For a few seconds, the entire fairground seems to freeze. The music stops mid-beat, cut off as if the power itself recoiled. One overhead light continues to spin above the wreckage, casting jagged, shuddering shadows across the crushed remains of the ride. Fairground workers break into a sprint, radios clutched tightly in their hands, shouting over one another as they begin pulling up splintered beams and mangled parts, trying to reach whoever might still be alive beneath it all. Above them, several gondolas remain suspended in the air, tilted at impossible angles. Their shells torn open, some swaying loosely from twisted supports, exposed to the night and illuminated in uneven flashes by the rotating beacon overhead. Paramedics arrive quickly, but there is little they can do to reverse the damage already done. 7 people are pronounced dead at the scene, or shortly after. 16 others are rushed to hospitals with life-threatening injuries. Fractured skulls, broken limbs, internal bleeding. The survivors are scattered across the platform, some conscious and calling out, others lying in eerie silence. The only movement coming from the flicker of emergency lights across their bodies. Among them is a man named Vincenzo Maniscalco, trapped in one of the final gondolas to strike the crane. He had just enough time to curl his legs up and brace himself against the inner frame. That instinct spared him from the worst, saving his life and his legs. His account would later become one of the deafening testimonies of the investigation, and the investigation confirmed what was already apparent. The ride had collided with a crane that should never have been there. It had been brought in without clearance, operated without checks, and allowed to intrude onto an active ride zone without warning. Responsibility didn't end with Vitae. As the investigation deepened, it became clear that the failure had been collective. Several Skylab operators had reportedly been drinking that night, and despite standard protocol, no one had inspected the ride path before launching the final cycle. There had been no communication between teams, no cross-checks or confirmations to ensure the surrounding area was safe, and the safety perimeter, meant to serve as a barrier between machinery and the public, had been left wide open and unenforced. In the months that followed, the site was cleared without ceremony. The remaining gondolas were quietly dismantled and the scaffolding taken down. And before long, a new attraction stood where Skylab had once rotated through the night sky. Music filled the fairgrounds again. Visitors returned in droves. And as the lights continued to spin overhead, the memory of what happened was slowly pushed aside, buried beneath laughter, motion, and the illusion that nothing had changed. Years later, Vincenzo returned to walk those same paths, to stand in the space where everything changed. He never rode another attraction again. In interviews, he refused to call what happened an accident. To him, it wasn't chance. It was the result of people not doing what they were supposed to. Amusement parks are designed to create joy, to help us forget about our problems, to make us feel alive. But when safety becomes an afterthought, when thrills are pushed beyond the realm of reason, these places can become death traps disguised as fun. And the next time you're standing in line for a ride, heart pounding, sun shining on your face, music in your ears, remember this. It's not only the height or the speed that makes a ride dangerous, it's what people choose to ignore. If you know of any other theme park incidents that deserve attention, share them in the comments below. And if you want more true stories of fun turned fatal, subscribe. More to come.